I'm looking at a river system today that's been closed to fishing for over 50 years. Very curious to explore it underwater and see what the difference is in fish behavior and populations in a spot where the fish have never been fished for. Let's have a look underwater today. We approach the first run I spend some time on from downstream, walking up towards it. Now we examine from an overhead perspective. The overhead view was shot a little after I first looked under the water, so the sun is not showing on it as much in this image as it was when I was actually shooting the footage under the water that we're about to see, but it still provides a good view. Where we're going to see some action is right here, by this boulder and log. Let's stick the camera underneath the water. We come across a good rainbow near a boulder. Interestingly enough, it's right in the sun. I slowly push the camera closer and closer, and not a problem. He's happy. And I say he because this rainbow is clearly a male with the longer snout and jawline with still the remnants of a small kype on the lower jaw. Much more of a characteristic of a male trout. But he has no problem with sitting out in the bright light. I mean, he has a boulder for cover and to act as a current block, but I suspect that from above he would be fairly easy to see, not by our vision, but by a predator better than us perhaps. Oh, and here comes another fish that wants to get into the field of view. It blows past downstream and swings around to come right in front. It's not what I would call a very shy fish, that's for sure. That second fish disappears, but then it comes back again. And yet again it comes back. That second fish literally just keeps coming back. At least it now settles in further back into the background. Let's see if we can nudge a little bit closer on these fish. We can tell by watching this fella how the current wraps around this boulder. He's sitting at an upward diagonal angle, not parallel to the riverbanks. I find it amazing how we rarely find fish sitting in the traditional straight upstream position that you see in books and such. And that of course is because the currents are almost never linear in nature. They're curving, swirling, and all over the place. And that is what your flies deal with in trying to get you that perfect natural drift. Let's pan away from this fish for now and come back in the evening time. I return back to that same pool much later in the day when the sun is mostly gone to see if anything has changed. It's definitely harder to see in this low light now. But we find the same rainbow in about roughly the same spot, definitely backside or edge of the rock, and it lets us get close. It seems to spot something down to its left and clearly turns for it, giving us a beautiful flash I'm sure we would have seen from above the water. I couldn't quite tell what it went for, but it certainly had the trout's full attention. And there it has enough of us and buggers off, so we'll move on too. Next we move to more of a run with a few boulders and seams thrown in. We're going to focus on two places, as this is where we find the fish. Let's go under the water now. There is a trout in the downstream location we noted in the overhead, sitting out in the open of the midday sun. I'm noticing a trend with fish in exposed areas in this river. It's an actively feeding fish, unlike the last one we examined, and its stomach is quite plump. The current is nasty on the camera. It's hard to get a stable image. The fish is bouncing around a lot too, but I'll mention it again. This fish is in the midday sun with little hesitation in being there, which is interesting. Let's jump upstream a little bit further to the upper location we had circled. We are just below some white water created by a couple of boulders protruding out of the water. We look at the white water but see nothing in that turbid area. But just to the left, another rainbow trout sitting in the sun. So far I'd say most of the trout we've seen have been risk takers, sitting out in the sun. I work my way up the river now a fair bit, 20 minutes of walking without seeing a fish. And then I come to this shady patch with a few boulders in it. And right by this boulder is a trout that is definitely not a risk taker. Let's look at it. Not only is it in the shade, but it is tight against the boulder and facing downstream, the direction I'm coming up from. It probably knows I have been coming far before I found its position. I notice this fish is well fed, like most of the others, with a definite bulge in its stomach. Unlike the other fish observed today though, this rainbow is in more of a classic tough to reach sheltering line where you'd have to fish all around the boulder to find it. Even then, you'd have to hope to read the currents right and manage to get your drift right, probably in the opposite direction you expect it is facing. In other words, from your perspective, you'd want your fly or lure catching an undertow and being pulled upstream. We continue onward to a section of river that has much more flow to it. It is narrower, swifter, yet on all sides it is much more overgrown, with ample shade coming from many overhanging trees. A real casting challenge. When we look from the overhead shot, the sun is shining brightly into the water and we can see a dark, submerged branch with boulders all around it. This is where we find our fish. First off, there's that dark branch we can clearly see in the overhead, and this current is strong. But there is a trout on the other side of the boulder. It's some distance away still. We'll try and get a little bit closer. Again, the trend has been that the majority of the trout have been sitting in the sun, regardless if they are feeding or not, and there's another fish in the distance closer to the shadow line. Very abruptly, the close fish rushes next to the camera, presumably to check it out, and then rushes back. Odd, but interesting. Then it grabs something. Let's see if we can get a better view. Both fish are doing some regular feeding, and neither is bothered by the sun. I mean, the closest fish isn't fully exposed in a run with no possible shelter. There is shadows to the sides it can skirt to. There is structure in the way of a submerged branch and a boulder nearby. All things it can flee to or feel safe around if it senses danger, but it's still largely in the sunshine. Finally, after several minutes of watching, I go to move downstream, and that movement clearly triggers a reaction from the close trout. It races at the camera, not away from it. Again, odd but interesting behavior. After scanning some unproductive water, I come back to see 3 rainbows here now feeding. Like the others we have seen, the sun shining brightly above them on a 30 Celsius degree day doesn't seem to be a high concern. What interesting things did we end up seeing today? Well, today I explored a region of a watershed that has been closed to fishing for over 50 years. I wanted to see if the lack of fishing pressure had an impact on the behavior and populations of the fish. Examining this river today was an extreme case of examining unpressured waters, a spot which may have very few predators. My initial 2 thoughts before this were, there should be more fish, and the fish should be less fearful of human activity. That is, the fish might be less wary, even to a minor degree only. I believe the latter was true. I frequently get close to fish, so that wasn't too different. What was different was that on this closed river was a willingness of the fish to sit more exposed, such as right in the sun. Yes, they did have boulders nearby, which offered some cover, as well as a deflection from the current, but even with a lot of nearby shade available to them in most cases, these fish in this river system were not really using it. At least not when we were watching them and not the fish we were watching. Although I am generally successful at getting close to fish with slow movements, you have to admit that the fish aren't rushing to the nearby cover when a 6-foot-tall man carrying a camera pole is walking next to them. What would drive them away? As for the fish population numbers, the numbers were smaller than I expected. I ballparked that in 300 meters or 1,000 feet of river section on average. I probably only saw 5 or 6 adult fish, even during an active feeding time. The fish were larger and well fed, and although I did see some juvenile fish in the fringes, like around the shallow riverbank stuff and all that, there was a fair difference in the size of the fish. Overall, there are fewer fish, but better fish. I think that suggests that even when the fish don't have man as a predator, they can find a balance in the availability of food and spawning area, and don't necessarily overpopulate a river even when there may be fewer predators, allowing them to do so. Not every water system is like this, and I have seen other rivers and lakes where the opposite is quite true. A lack of predators, often man, combined with a good availability of food and spawning area has led to an overpopulated fish base all stunted in size. But that wasn't the case here, which was nice to see in such a pristine setting. What I observed also implies that in unpressured waters, fish might be easier to approach, but it doesn't mean you're going to catch more fish, simply because the population isn't there. A lot of spots you look at may give you the initial impression the river or lake is lifeless, no fish, but you may need to do a lot of searching to find your fish, only to be pleasantly rewarded when you do find some. In lake fishing, for example, where a lake perhaps experiences regular summer or winter kills, you may find that the lake is devoid of fish when you try it. But often the truth of the matter is that if you look hard enough, you may find that those fish that are there are vastly bigger and stronger due to the smaller population. Thank you for watching today, and I hope you found the information useful.